In the heart of a brutal winter, a Mustang Mare lies injured in the snow, her fragile foal trembling by her side. The storm grows fiercer, and hope seems lost until one man faces a choice that could change everything. This story is about survival, sacrifice, and an act of compassion that will touch your heart. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories like this one. Now let's dive in. The snowstorm swept across the valley like a relentless beast, burying everything in its path. On the outskirts of the ranch, thick layers of frost clung to the fences and the wind howled through the bare trees. Sam Carter, a retired horse trainer, leaned against his stable door, watching the chaos unfold outside. At 52, he had seen plenty of harsh winters in Wyoming, but this storm was unlike anything he'd experienced in years. The ranch was quiet. His horses were safely sheltered, their stalls filled with fresh hay. Yet something gnawed at him, a sense of unease that wouldn't let go. Sam's ranch wasn't just a business. It was a sanctuary for wild Mustangs rescued from harsh conditions or neglect. Over the years, he had earned a reputation as a man who wouldn't turn his back on a horse in need. As the blizzard roared on, Sam turned to leave, but a faint sound stopped him in his tracks. It was distant, almost swallowed by the wind, but unmistakable, a desperate whinny. His heart clenched. He grabbed his coat, flashlight, and gloves, then stepped out into the biting cold. His dog Rosie, a border collie with sharp instincts, followed closely. The icy wind stung his face as he trudged through the knee-deep snow. The sound grew louder, guiding him toward the edge of his property near a small grove of trees. When his flashlight finally caught the source, he stopped in his tracks. Lying in the snow was a Mustang Mare, her dark coat glistening with frost. She struggled to lift her head as the beam of light hit her, her breath visible in weak puffs. Beside her, a tiny foal shivered violently, its legs barely able to hold it upright. Sam's chest tightened. The mare's flank was streaked with blood, and her body quivered from the cold. It was clear she had been wandering the wilds with her foal before the storm overwhelmed her. Her wound looked fresh, perhaps the result of a predator's attack or a desperate escape through barbed wire. The foal, fragile and unsteady, nudged its mother with a whimper. "Easy now," Sam murmured, taking a cautious step forward. He had worked with the wild horses long enough to know their fear. The mare tried to rise, but her legs buckled beneath her. Her eyes, wide and filled with pain, met him for a moment before she dropped her head back into the snow. Rosie let out a soft whine, sensing the urgency. Sam knelt down, his voice steady and low. "You can't stay out here, girl. You'll both die." The mare's ears flicked slightly at his words, but she didn't move. Sam's mind raced. Bringing a wild Mustang into the stable was risky, the confined space, the other horses it could lead to chaos, but leaving her and the foal in the storm was unthinkable. He clenched his jaw, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He stood, looking at the mare and her foal one last time before making his choice. "Stay with me," he whispered to Rosie, then hurried back toward the barn. He returned minutes later with a sled and a blanket, his resolve unshaken. The mare flinched as he approached again, but exhaustion kept her still. It took all of Sam's strength to lift her onto the sled, wrapping her in the blanket to conserve what little body heat she had left. The foal resisted at first, but eventually followed, staying close to its mother. The journey back to the stable was grueling. Sam's muscles burned as he pulled the sled through the thick snow, the wind battering against him. Rosie stayed close, barking encouragement as if sensing the enormity of the moment. When they finally reached the stable, Sam opened the door and led them into an empty stall. He filled it with fresh hay, water, and a heat lamp, watching as the mare collapsed onto the bedding. The foal nestled beside her, its small body trembling less in the warmth of the shelter. Sam stood back, his hands trembling from the cold and effort. He had done everything he could for now. As he watched the mare and her foal settle, a question lingered in his mind. Had he made the right choice? The storm raged on through the night, its icy winds rattling the stable walls. Inside, Sam moved quickly, gathering supplies he hadn't touched in years: antiseptic, bandages, and an old kit he used back when he worked as a vet. The mare lay motionless on the thick bed of hay, her breath slow and uneven. The foal curled against her, its small frame trembling with exhaustion and fear. Sam knelt by the stall, speaking softly. "You're safe now, girl. I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me." The mare's ears flicked weakly at his voice, but her body remained still. Her wound, a deep, jagged gash along her hindquarters, was inflamed and caked with dirt. Infection was setting in, and time was running out. Rosie sat vigil near the stall door, her eyes never leaving Sam as he worked. He approached the mare with a warm, damp cloth, wiping away the dried blood as gently as he could. She flinched at the touch, her muscles tightening instinctively. The foal let out a sharp, frightened whinny, pressing closer to its mother. "It's okay," Sam murmured, his voice steady. He paused, giving the mare a moment to settle before continuing. Each wipe of the cloth revealed more of the wound's severity, and with it, Sam's growing worry. The mare's strength was fading, and without antibiotics, she wouldn't make it through the next few days. The foal, curious despite its fear, took a tentative step toward Sam. Its wide eyes were filled with innocence, and for a brief moment, Sam smiled. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" he said softly. The foal sniffed his outstretched hand, then quickly retreated to the safety of its mother's side. Hours passed as Sam cleaned and dressed the mare's wound. He applied a salve to stave off infection and wrapped her hindquarters with clean bandages. The work was slow and meticulous, but Sam didn't rush. He knew that trust couldn't be forced, especially with a wild animal. Every movement had to be deliberate, every action calm. As the first light of dawn crept through the stable windows, the storm began to subside. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Sam sat back on his heels, exhaustion weighing heavy on him. The mare's breathing had steadied, and her eyes, though still wary, seemed to hold a glimmer of recognition. "You're a fighter," Sam said quietly, leaning against the stall door. "I've seen a lot of horses in my time, but you've got a fire in you." He glanced at the foal, now dozing beside its mother. "And that little one, he's got your spirit." The day wore on, and Sam went about his chores, checking on the mare and foal every hour. Rosie stayed close, her presence a comfort to both man and horse. By mid-afternoon, the mare had managed to lift her head, nibbling tentatively at the hay Sam had placed nearby. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Word of Sam's rescue began to spread through the small town. Neighbors called, offering help, but Sam declined. He had always been a private man, preferring to handle things on his own. Besides, this was more than just a rescue. It was a test of his resilience, a reminder of why he had dedicated his life to these animals. That evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Sam sat outside the stall, sipping a mug of black coffee. The mare watched him, her gaze steady. For the first time, she didn't flinch when he moved closer. Slowly, carefully, he reached out his hand, letting it hover just inches from her muzzle. She sniffed cautiously, then lowered her head, a gesture that felt like a truce. Sam smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "You're going to make it," he whispered. "Both of you." But as the cold night settled in, doubt crept into his mind. The mare's condition was still critical, and there was no guarantee she would recover. Sam leaned back against the stall, staring at the stars through the stable window. He had done everything he could, but was it enough? As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, the mare stirred, her dark eyes watching over the man who had given her, and her full of fighting chance. The next morning, the sun cast a pale glow over the snow-covered ranch, its light reflecting off the icy fields. Inside the stable, the air was warmer, filled with the faint smell of hay and the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. Sam stirred from his makeshift bed near the stall, his back aching from a night spent leaning against the wooden door. The mare was awake, her ears twitching as Sam stood and stretched. She had eaten most of the hay he had left for her, and her foal, energized by the meal, pranced clumsily round the stall. It was the first sign of real life Sam had seen in them since the rescue, and it brought a faint smile to his face. "Good morning, you two," he said softly, stepping closer. The foal, emboldened by its mother's calmness, approached Sam cautiously. It sniffed his hand before retreating again. its tiny hooves clicking softly against the wooden floor. But Sam's moment of relief was short-lived. As he inspected the mare's wound, his chest tightened. The bandages were damp, stained with a dark discharge, a sign the infection was spreading. Her breathing was shallow, and though she had regained some strength, the danger was far from over. He paced the barn, thinking through his options. Antibiotics were the only solution, but they weren't something he kept on hand. The nearest veterinarian was over an hour away, and in these conditions, the roads were treacherous. Calling for help risked drawing attention to the mare, and Sam knew all too well how wild Mustangs were viewed by some in the area. Many saw them as pests, creatures that encroached on grazing land and resources. Rosie trotted beside him, sensing his frustration. She barked once, her sharp eyes fixed on him. "I know, girl," Sam muttered. "We can't just sit here and do nothing." After a moment's hesitation, he made his decision. He would drive to town. No matter how dangerous the roads were, he couldn't let the mare die. Not after everything they had been through. He scribbled a quick note for his neighbor, asking them to check on the ranch in case of an emergency, and then loaded his truck with supplies. The drive was harrowing. Ice coated the roads, and the snow banks on either side loomed high. Narrowing the path, Sam gripped the wheel tightly. His jaw clenched as the truck skidded on a patch of black ice. His heart pounded, but he pressed on. The image of the mare and her foal burned into his mind. When he reached the veterinary clinic, the receptionist greeted him with a puzzled look. "Sam, what brings you here in this weather?" "I need antibiotics," he said urgently, "for mare." The vet, Dr. Harper, emerged from the back room, her brow furrowed. "What's going on?" Sam hesitated. He trusted Dr. Harper. She had worked with him before and shared his respect for wild horses. But he knew that bringing attention to the mare could complicate things. "It's a rescue," he said finally. "A wild Mustang. She's hurt bad. And I don't have much time." Dr. Harper's expression softened. "You've always had a soft spot for the tough cases, haven't you?" She grabbed a bottle of antibiotics from the shelf and handed it to him. "This should help. Inject it into the muscle twice a day and keep her warm." Sam nodded, his gratitude evident. "Thank you." The return trip was even more perilous, with the storm picking up again. By the time Sam reached the ranch, his hands were numb, and his body ached from the tension of the drive. He rushed into the stable, relief flooding him when he saw the mare and foal still huddled together. "All right, girl," he said, preparing the syringe. "This might sting a little, but it's going to save your life." The mare flinched as he administered the injection, but she didn't fight him. Sam stroked her neck, murmuring words of reassurance. The foal watched intently, its small eyes filled with curiosity. As the hours passed, Sam noticed a subtle change. The mare's breathing steadied, and her eyes, once clouded with pain, seemed clearer. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was a start. That night, as the snow fell softly outside, Sam sat by the stall, exhaustion pulling at him. The foal approached, again its tiny nose brushing against his hand. This time, it didn't retreat. Sam smiled, a warmth spreading through him despite the cold. "You're going to be all right," he whispered, looking at the mare. "Both of you." But deep down, he knew their journey was far from over. The mare showed subtle signs of improvement as the days passed. Her breathing became steadier, and she began eating more consistently. The foal, emboldened by its mother's recovery, explored the stable with increasing curiosity, its tiny hooves tapping lightly on the wooden floor. Sam couldn't help but feel a growing sense of hope. Yet, as he cleaned the mare's wound one afternoon, a lingering doubt gnawed at him. Her condition was far from stable, and the weight of the responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Outside, the storm had finally broken, leaving behind a landscape of glistening white. The ranch seemed eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the occasional rustle of hay or the soft nickers of the horses in their stalls. Sam leaned against the stable door, sipping a cup of coffee to ward off the cold. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection, his mind wandering back to the day he had decided to turn his ranch into a sanctuary. It had been after losing his wife, Sarah, to a sudden illness. The grief had consumed him, and for months, He had struggled to find meaning in anything. It was a chance encounter with a wild Mustang, a battered, terrified stallion, that had reignited his purpose. Rescuing that horse had been like rescuing himself, and he had poured every ounce of his energy into building a haven for animals in need. A sharp bark from Rosie jolted him from his thoughts. The dog stood at the edge of the property, her ears pricked and tail stiff. Sam frowned, setting his mug down. "What is it, girl?" As he approached, he saw a truck pulling up to the gate. His heart sank. It was Charlie Benson, a local rancher known for his disdain for wild horses. Charlie had clashed with Sam before, accusing him of harboring pests that disrupted the balance of the land. "What do you want?" "Charlie," Sam called out, his voice steady but wary. Charlie stepped out of his truck, his boots crunching against the snow. "Heard you've been up to something, Carter. Bringing wild Mustangs onto your property again." Sam's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "See, that's where you're wrong," Charlie said, leaning against the fence. "Those horses roam onto my grazing land. They're a nuisance, and now with the snow this bad, they're putting a strain on resources we can't afford to lose." "They're not your concern," Sam shot back. "I'm taking care of them." Charlie smirked, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? But those animals aren't meant to be saved. They're wild for a reason." Sam felt his fists clench, but he forced himself to stay calm. "If you've got nothing useful to say, you can leave." Charlie's expression darkened. "You're playing a dangerous game, Carter. Don't let those Mustangs drag you down." As Charlie drove away, Sam stood at the gate, his chest heaving with frustration. He knew Charlie wasn't the type to let things go. The mare and her foal were safe for now, but how long before someone tried to interfere? Back in the stable, Sam sank onto a bale of hay, exhaustion overtaking him. Rosie nuzzled his leg, her soft eyes full of concern. "I'm fine," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. The mare lifted her head as he entered the stall, her dark eyes meeting his. Despite her weakened state, there was a quiet strength in her gaze that seemed to echo his own determination. The foal, now more confident, approached him again, its soft muzzle brushing against his hand. "You're fighters," Sam said quietly, stroking the foal's neck. "We'll get through this together." But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the chill of night seeped into the stable, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of their journey was yet to come. The morning air was sharp and biting as Sam walked into the stable, the crunch of snow underfoot muffled by the quiet of the ranch. Inside, the warmth of the stable greeted him, along with the soft snorts and nickers of his horses. The mare lifted her head as he approached, her eyes clearer than they had been days ago. The foal, now brimming with energy, trotted around her, its playful nature a stark contrast to the dire circumstances they had faced. Sam knelt beside the mare, carefully unwrapping the bandages on her flank. The wound was healing slowly, but steadily, a small victory in their uphill battle. "You're tougher than you look, girl," he said softly, his voice tinged with affection. The mare twitched her ears, her gaze steady on him. For the first time, he felt a flicker of trust between them, just as he finished redressing the wound. Rosie barked sharply outside, her urgent tone cutting through the stillness. Sam's stomach tightened. He hurried to the stable door and peered out into the snowy expanse. Two figures were approaching, their shapes distorted by the glare of the morning sun. As they drew closer, Sam recognized Charlie Benson and another man, a local law enforcement officer. "What now?" Sam muttered under his breath, stepping out into the cold. Rosie stood at his side, her stance protective. "Morning, Carter," Charlie called out, his tone smug. "Thought we'd drop by for a little chat." Sam crossed his arms, his expression hard. "What do you want, Charlie?" Charlie gestured toward the stable. "Word around town is you've got a couple of Mustangs in there. Wild ones, that true?" Sam's jaw tightened. "They're under my care. They were injured during the storm." The officer, a younger man named Deputy Harris, stepped forward. "Sam, I understand. You've got a soft spot for these animals, but you know the rules. Wild horses are protected by federal law. If someone files a complaint, we have to investigate." "Complaints," Sam repeated. his voice laced with frustration. "Let me guess who filed it." Charlie smirked, but said nothing. Deputy Harris sighed. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, but if those horses aren't relocated to a proper sanctuary, we'll have to involve the Bureau of Land Management, and you know how they handle things." Sam's heart sank. The Bureau's involvement often meant removal and sometimes worse for wild Mustangs. These horses wouldn't have survived without my help, he argued. "I'm not handing them over to be rounded up or worse." Deputy Harris shifted uncomfortably. "I get it, Sam, I really do, but my hands are tied." Charlie leaned against the fence, a satisfied grin on his face. "You can't save them all, Carter." Sam clenched his fists, his mind racing. Turning the horses over wasn't an option, but defying the order would only escalate the situation. He glanced toward the stable where the mare and her foal waited, unaware of the storm brewing outside. "I need time," Sam said finally. "A few more days. Let me get them strong enough to travel, and I'll take them to a sanctuary myself." Deputy Harris hesitated, then nodded. 3 days, Sam. That's all I can give you." As they walked away, Charlie threw a parting shot over his shoulder. "You're wasting your time, Carter. They're just horses." Sam stood frozen, his breath visible in the cold air as the truck disappeared down the road. A wave of determination washed over him. They might only be horses to Charlie, but to Sam, they were survivors, symbols of resilience and hope. He returned to the stable, his resolve hardening with every step. The mare watched him as he entered, her gaze calm but curious. The foal approached, nudging his hand as if sensing his turmoil. "We've got 3 days, Sam murmured, his voice low but firm, "and I'm not letting anyone take you away." That night, as the wind picked up and the temperature dropped, Sam stayed by the stall, planning his next move. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but giving up wasn't an option, not for these horses, not after everything they'd been through. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Sam worked tirelessly to strengthen the mare, administering her medication and feeding her small but steady meals. Her progress was slow, but she had regained enough energy to stand on her own and even nuzzle her foal affectionately. Sam couldn't help but feel a swell of pride at their resilience, but the looming deadline was a constant weight on his mind. On the final evening before the Bureau of Land Management was set to arrive, Sam stood in the stable, his hands gripping the stall door. He had spent the day making calls to sanctuaries across the state, but none had the capacity to take in the mare and her foal immediately. Time was running out, and the options were dwindling. Rosie barked sharply, pulling Sam from his thoughts. Her ears were pinned back, her stance alert. Sam stepped outside, his heart sinking as he saw headlights cutting through the darkness. A truck rumbled up the driveway, its tires crunching over the snow. Charlie Benson's silhouette was unmistakable in the driver's seat, and beside him was another man, a stranger carrying a rifle. Sam's pulse quickened. This wasn't a formal visit from the authorities. This was something else entirely. Charlie stepped out of the truck, his face twisted into a smug grin. "Evening, Carter. Thought I'd come by and see how you're doing." Sam's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Charlie?" Charlie shrugged, gesturing toward the stable. "Just making sure you're not harboring any wild Mustangs. You know how dangerous they can be." The man with the rifle stepped forward, his expression cold. "We're here to take care of a problem," he said flatly. Sam's chest tightened. "You're not laying a hand on them." Charlie laughed, the sound grating in the cold night air. "Come on, Carter, be reasonable. Those horses don't belong here. You can't save them all." Sam stepped in front of the stable door, his hands clenched into fists. Rosie growled low, her body tense and ready. "You want them? You'll have to go through me." The man with the rifle raised his weapon, but Sam didn't flinch. His voice was steady, full of conviction. "If you pull that trigger, you'll have to live with it. These animals have done nothing wrong. They deserve a chance." For a moment, the air was thick with tension, the standoff teetering on the edge of violence. Then, from inside the stable, a sound broke the silence, the soft nicker of the foal followed by the mare's low whinny. It was a sound of trust, of life clinging to hope despite the odds. The man with the rifle hesitated, his grip faltering. Charlie scowled, his confidence wavering. "Come on, man," he urged. "Let's get this over with." But the man didn't move. His gaze shifted toward the stable, his expression softening. "They're just trying to survive," he muttered, lowering the rifle. "I'm not doing this." Charlie's face twisted with anger. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm done," the man said firmly, stepping back. "This isn't right." Charlie cursed under his breath, but with no backup, he had no choice but to retreat. He glared at Sam, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Carter." As the truck disappeared into the night, Sam felt his knees weaken with relief. He leaned against the stable door, his breath visible in the frigid air. Rosie pressed against his leg, her soft whine grounding him. Inside the stable, the mare and foal stood close, their dark eyes reflecting the lantern's warm glow. Sam stepped into the stall, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe now," he said, stroking the mare's neck. "I won't let anyone hurt you." That night, as the ranch fell into a deep silence, Sam sat by the stall, his resolve stronger than ever. The fight wasn't over, but for now, they had won a small but significant victory. He closed his eyes, exhaustion finally overtaking him. But not before a single thought crossed his mind. Some battles are worth every sacrifice. The dawn broke with a golden light that stretched across the snow-covered ranch, casting long shadows that danced with the gentle sway of the trees. The storm had passed, and the world seemed to exhale in relief. Sam woke in the stable, the ache in his back a reminder of the long night he had endured. As he stretched, his eyes fell on the mare and her foal. The mare stood tall, her body still, lean but steady. She nibbled at the hay Sam had laid out, her ears flicking contentedly. The foal, brimming with energy, pranced beside her, its tiny legs finally showing the strength of life renewed. Sam couldn't help but smile, the weight of the past few days lifting slightly. "You're tougher than you look," he murmured to the mare, stepping closer. She turned her head toward him, her dark eyes meeting his with a calm trust that hadn't been there before. The foal, as curious as ever, trotted up to him and nudged his hand. Earning a soft chuckle, Sam knelt beside the mare, carefully unwrapping her bandages. The wound, once raw and angry, had begun to close, the edges clean and pink. With healing, relief flooded him. The antibiotics had worked, and his efforts hadn't been in vain. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind as he worked Charlie's threats. The cold barrel of the rifle pointed at the stable, the tension that had hung thick in the air. It all seemed surreal now, but Sam knew the danger wasn't entirely gone. Charlie wouldn't let this go easily, and the Bureau of Land Management would come knocking soon. He had to act quickly to secure a future for the mare and her foal. After feeding the horses and ensuring the mare was comfortable, Sam retreated to the kitchen, a steaming mug of coffee warming his hands. He made another round of calls, this time reaching a sanctuary several hours away that specialized in rehabilitating wild mustangs. They agreed to take the pair, but the journey wouldn't be easy. The roads were still icy, and the mare's condition, though improving, was fragile. That afternoon, with Rosie trotting at his heels, Sam prepared the trailer. He lined it with fresh hay and secured the partitions, making sure the mare and foal would be as comfortable as possible. The process was slow, each step deliberate. He couldn't afford any mistakes. When the time came to load them, the mare hesitated at first, her instincts flaring. Sam spoke to her softly, his tone steady and calm. "It's okay, girl. This is the next step. You'll be safe there." The foal, sensing its mother's reluctance, nuzzled against her side as if urging her forward. Finally, with a deep breath, she stepped into the trailer, her trust in Sam overcoming her fear. The drive was grueling, the icy roads demanding Sam's full concentration. Rosie sat in the passenger seat, her head resting on his leg, a quiet presence that grounded him. The hours stretched long, but Sam kept going, fueled by the knowledge that he was giving the mare and her foal a chance at life. When they finally arrived at the sanctuary, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A team of caretakers greeted him warmly, their faces lighting up as they saw the mare and her foal. Sam watched as they unloaded the pair, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. "You've done something incredible," one of the caretakers said, patting Sam on the shoulder. "They'll thrive here, thanks to you." As he drove back to the ranch that night, the empty trailer rattling behind him, Sam felt a profound sense of peace. The mare and her foal had survived against all odds, and in saving them, he had rediscovered a part of himself he thought he had lost. The ranch wasn't just a sanctuary for horses, it was a sanctuary for him too. A place where courage and compassion could flourish. When he arrived home, the stars were bright overhead, their light reflecting off the snow. Rosie barked once, her tail wagging as they stepped inside the warm farmhouse. Sam poured himself a cup of tea and sat by the window, gazing out at the moonlit fields. He thought of the mare and her foal, safe and sound in their new home, and a smile spread across his face. Sometimes, he realized, the smallest lives could teach the greatest lessons. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the land he had fought so hard to protect, Sam felt a deep sense of purpose. He had done what mattered most. He had given them a second chance. As Sam gazed out at the moonlit fields, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The mare and her foal had found safety, and their survival was a testament to courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. In saving them, Sam had also saved a part of himself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. Share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and help us spread the message of hope and kindness. Together, we can make a difference.